Companions, welcome. I'm back to telling you about my walks in the veld on my safari into the African wilderness. For this post, I want to tell you about the day I found the elephant. Now, this country is wonderful elephant country. There's lots of grass plains where they can graze during summer when the grass is green, but during winter, the grass tends to dry out because, as we know, the plants will draw down their nutrients to their roots and prepare for winter, and then they go to sleep. The material that remains above ground is dry and tasteless and without nutrition. And then the elephants tend to switch to browsing on foliage. And there are lots of trees here that are either evergreen, like some acacia species, or that retain their leaves deep into winter, like mupani, even terminalia, which the elephant love, and they will eat these then during these months. Now, I have been seeing lots of elephant sign on my walks. I saw their tracks at water holes and everywhere in the veld. I got the impression it's from a single breeding herd. Now, elephant breeding herds are not particularly territorial as far as my experience goes. There is sometimes a bit of conflict at waterholes when the water supply gets low, but normally they're not territorial. So there could be more than one breeding herd here. Now, I found lots of their signs everywhere. Now, I found their droppings. If you look at these droppings, you can see how coarse the material is. Because the elephant have already started switching from grass to foliage, and that includes a lot of twigs and even thinner branches. And they don't chew it finely, so you have this coarse structure to the dung. And here you can see where the spurfowl have kicked open the dung to look for insects that might be there or seeds. Other insects, like these dung beetles, have now come to utilize it, and the ants who are looking for other insects to catch. And I also found lots of sign of them browsing, in fact. Here you can see where they've broken the bark on this tree with the tips of their tusks, and they tore it off with their trunks and ate it. And here they simply broke off this young tree with their trunks and ripped the loose ends of bark and peeled it off and ate it. And this is also signs of feeding where they pushed over the mupani. Twigs stripped of bark is typical. Sometimes they break off these twigs and they carry them along as they walk and chew on them. And then they drop them at some point. And you find these twigs occasionally lying around. And that's a sure sign of the presence of elephant. You can tell from the twigs how long ago they were here, because if the surface of the stripped wood is still moist or even wet, then of course they're not far away. They can be quite destructive. Here you can see where they push over quite large trees, and they don't necessarily utilize the whole tree, only parts of it. Sometimes the bulls push over very big trees. It is thought that it has to do with demonstration of dominance, but I'm not sure. I also found a carcass. Now this, you can see the skull there, and the lower jaw to the left here, and bits of the skin there. Of course, extremely tough, the skin. These remains are probably a few months old, and it's a youngish elephant, maybe 15 or so. And the cause of death, of course, is unknown. Hard to think that a young animal like this can be found dead. It could be poaching, but then again, a young animal like this wouldn't carry much ivory. Anyway, be that as it may, one morning I found them. I first heard them. Elephants are very noisy grazers. They break off branches and push over trees, and you can actually hear them chewing even. And then they murmur at each other as they feed in their deep, not very loudly, but you can hear them. So I approached very carefully, and I thought there were about 6 to 8 of them from the sounds. And then this young female came into view. I was now quite close to them. because the bush was quite dense, although it had these little lanes through it, and I was able to spot her. I stood looking at her for a bit, but then to my right, this female with the baby came into view, and she was really close, 15 to 20 meters away. If you look closely, you can see some others further back from her and also to the left. Now, I realized I'm in a bit of a difficult position here because this baby was just a cute, bumbling little idiot. And it could really easily bumble right into me or close to me. And if the mother followed it, she would be like 10 or so meters away, and I could be in serious trouble. The normal tricks of waving and shouting and stuff was not going to work. She was not going to invite me for a play session with her baby. So I very discreetly and carefully retreated, and from a safer distance I could observe, and I stood watching them for a while. It was absolutely fascinating. Now, a lot is known about elephants, and I'm not a zoologist, and I've not studied elephants in detail. I've only observed them many times in the bush, so I can only tell you the bits I have observed. Now, these breeding herds are fascinating social structures. As we know, they are led by a matriarch, and this matriarch is totally accepted by the herd as the leader, and she takes absolute full responsibility for the survival and well-being of the herd. She leads them to grazing, she leads them to water in dry areas. From memory she keeps from her matriarch. She is just completely in control of their survival. There are no bulls in the breeding herd usually, all females and young, and most of them are related. Bulls are pushed out when they get to sexual maturity, around 12 or 15 if I recall correctly. And then they sometimes remain in the general vicinity of the mother herd for a while. Then eventually they wander off and they wander around alone. Or they eventually join bull herds. Now these bull herds are equally fascinating and extremely interesting, because that is where the bulls learn the etiquette of being an elephant bull. We know of examples where young bulls have been isolated without ever being part of a bull herd, and they have never learned proper manners, and they become rogue and problem animals. This was absolutely wonderful for me to stand watching this breeding herd. I eventually left them. I've also now run out of time. I think I'm already boring you and you want to get on with something else. So I hope you enjoyed this little bit about elephants, and I hope to see you again next week. Good luck.